Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is nutrition, and we're going to discuss why eating less isn't good for fat loss. So we've mentioned this in many podcasts in the past, but we've never devoted a singular podcast to just this topic. And the reason why I decided to do so was I was actually requested by a trainer. So we have a trainer education podcast, which are designed for trainers. There are often universal lessons for people and or leaders themselves, but we do it specifically for trainers. And recently I did a consultation with this trainer, and we had kind of processed through some of the podcasts they'd listened to, some of the issues they were having. And one thing that kept coming up was nutritionally, their clients would always opt to eat less and less and less, thinking that that was the key for fat loss, and it just ruined everything in the process, ruined their workouts, actually made fat loss harder, had all the negative effects we all know with it, and they were having a hard time getting their clients to really recognize the importance of not using that as a means of fat loss control. So just eating less or refusing to eat, it again falls into that black or white type mindset that we talked about that is not good. So we've talked already in the past about success, like long-term success versus failure types with dieting. Yeah, different mindsets and thought processes. So it was podcast 406 titled Short Term versus Long Term Success. And in that podcast, number 406, we discussed that often thinking of rules of nutrition as black or white, meaning on or off or all or nothing, are always a sign of failure. So things where somebody might get temporary results, but they're never going to maintain long-term results, long-term success. So they were saying how their clients would just say like, well, I'm just not going to eat blah, 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 blah. Or I'm not going to eat after time-wise. Or I'm not eating this, I'm not eating that. It was just always black or white, black and white. So I'm not eating any carbs. I'm not eating any fats. I'm never going to eat after 6 p.m. Or, well, I'm just not eating breakfast. I don't like breakfast anyhow. Stuff like that. So it was always this very black or white type things. And it always revolved around eating less and less and less. And they wanted to kind of find a way to combat against that. So the idea hopefully now is they'll have this podcast they can refer to, and it'll help. So for their clients, my clients, and all other clients, and people who aren't clients, okay, eating less, eating nothing does not help fat loss. Can you lose weight by eating less? Yes. Okay. And by eating too little, like way less, like significantly too low below what you should, does it help you lose weight? Yes, it does. Okay. We're not saying that doesn't work. If you eat less, you will weigh less. That's true. But there's a lot of negative effects that happen within that process of you losing weight. And then eventually you're going to realize you can't sustain life under severely low calories. So you're eventually going to want to go back to eating a normal type of caloric amount. However, you have not learned to better your habits. You go back to the same habits that made you overweight. And in the process of eating less, your body down regulates its metabolism and the speed in which it processes things in the body, which is related to its caloric need. So we have a fancy thing called basal metabolic rate, which refers to how many calories we burn at rest. So when you severely restrict calories, your body tries to slow down all processes of the body. So this is why people who go through anorexia and bulimia, they'll have hair fall out. They'll have really bad skin health, like nail health. The body just stops regulating things. It stops doing work when the calories get severely low. It reduces its caloric demand to adapt to the reduced caloric intake. The problem with that then is you now have a reduced system. And then when you go back to eating normal caloric amounts, it doesn't go right back to where it was before burning the normal calories. It's now at this reduced caloric burning, and now what used to make you maintain weight is now making you fat. So by eating less and eating severely too less, you are actually ruining future potential to even just maintain your weight. This is why people who go through cycles of starvation style diets actually often end up weighing more than when they first started the diet. So it always goes back to that joke of somebody says, I wish I was as fat as I thought I was when I was in high school, or I wish I was as fat as I thought I was in college. Meaning that I thought I was fat then, I'm really fat now. So what ends up happening is starvation style diets where you do high caloric restrictions, and like if it fits your macros, where somebody's like, well, I'm going to eat nothing all day, then eat like a bunch of cheesecake at night, and it's okay because my calories are fine. No, that does not work. We've gone over that in the past of why diets based on starvation, like keto style diets, intermittent fast style diets, why those things don't work. And again, it's often based around this ruining of the system by having calories so low. So in podcast 129, we cover starvation diets, most notably intermittent fasting and keto. Why those diets are temporarily successful, but long-term unsuccessful, and actually make you long-term even worse off. So go listen to podcast 129 if you would like to learn more about why those specific style of starvation diets, those specific style of eating less diets don't work long-term. So again, does eating less work short-term? Yes. Can eating less in a correct way be part of a permanent lifestyle fix? Yes. But when you eat too little, when you eat significantly below what you should have, that's when you get in trouble. Okay? So body fat, what body fat is its caloric protection. So body fat, okay, stored fat, is stored calories. So way back whenever food was inconsistent and we never really knew when we were going to get food, our body needed to develop a way in which if it had a caloric surplus, it could store those calories for the times when it had a caloric deficit. So at some point in time in human history, depending on whatever your religious beliefs are, there was inconsistency of nutritional availability. Therefore, our body would have developed the ability to store calories in times of feast, so it would have calories in times of famine. Okay? So that's what stored body fat is. It's caloric protection. We have it because of times when we don't have enough calories. When we have significantly below enough calories that the body feels stressed, it feels at danger, and feels like, holy crap, I better store more calories whenever I get them again to protect myself against this moment. So, when you skip meals, when you severely reduce your caloric intake, you actually reinforce the need for the body to create body fat. So you are actually creating the demand for body fat when you skip meals. So you are actively participating in making yourself fatter in the future when you skip a meal today. Okay? So how typical eating patterns reinforce body fat is because when we're most active, we deem ourselves to be too busy to eat. So therefore, we operate in a caloric deficit. Then at the end of the day, we typically shove a bunch of food in our face that we don't need at that time. Your body then takes the caloric surplus at that time, saves it as body fat as protection for the next day's deficit. So especially when people wake up and they skip breakfast, they start the machine of their body. Okay? And our body, even when it's just awake, not even doing anything that amazing, you're just sitting in a chair doing nothing, but you're awake, okay? That is actually going to still burn about 70% of total calories of your caloric needs. So if you typically would need, say, 1,000 calories a day, it's way more than that, but I'm just making the math easier for me, okay? So if I typically need 1,000 calories a day when I'm super active, and today I'm just sitting on my butt doing nothing, I'm still going to need 700 calories. I still need 70% of my calories to operate just the machine of our body being awake and alive. So when you eat nothing, when you skip breakfast and you start operating your body on a 0-calorie amount, you are now 70% in a deficit. You are starting to create stress. You are starting to create the body's demand and need for body fat. Okay? So we talk about the math of that in podcast 390, Proper Nutrition for Sedentary Workers, in which we discuss why that 70% number comes to be and why it's really important. So if you just get up in the morning and you start moving yourself, but you don't consume at least 70% of your caloric need, you are creating a deficit that your body then feels stress enough to address and to compensate for. So therefore, whenever you go eat whenever you go eat lunch, and say you eat a really controlled lunch and you actually eat really healthy, okay, well, you're just furthering the deficit. You haven't replenished the deficit, and maybe you're eating just enough what you need at that time, but there's still the deficit that was existed in the morning. So at some point in your time in your day, you are going to overeat calories for what you need at that moment. So whether it's going out to eat for lunch with friends and you have a burger and fries that you absolutely didn't need, and your body's going to take the excess at that meal, or until you hold off all calories throughout the end of the day, and then all of a sudden at night you have supper, then you have a big meal before you go to bed, like a bowl of ice cream, a bottle of wine or two, like where you consume calories you don't need sitting on your butt at home doing nothing. Your body then takes that surplus and it replenishes the body fat that you had used and actually reinforces it with more body fat as a protective mechanism against the next time you go into a deficit. So the more frequently you go into a caloric deficit, the more frequently your body will try to fight against that, and its need for body fat will increase over time. So that's how a typical way that most people eat reinforces the need for body fat and why they don't get any leaner. They undereat during the day, creating a deficit that the body feels the need to address. They then overeat at night. The body takes the excess calories at night, it replenishes the deficit that you had created earlier in the day, but then reinforces with extra body fat to protect itself against a future deficit. So that is really, really, really bad. That is why starvation-style diets, like intermittent fasting, where I don't eat for, say 18 hours of the day, and then all of a sudden I eat everything I can in 6 hours. That's so stupid, because you're actually reinforcing exactly the problem that made you fat in the first place. Is you created a deficit, you then created a surplus. The more you do that cycle, deficit, surplus, deficit, surplus, the more you repeat that cycle, the greater the demand and need for body fat becomes. And the further down regulated your body's metabolism and regular BMR, the amount of calories it burns at rest, goes further and further down. So therefore, whenever you break out of the diet style, that it was not a lifestyle and wasn't maintainable, and you try to go back to your normal habits now make you fatter. Okay? So, eating less does give a possible short-term benefit. If I start eating nothing today, will I weigh less in 3 days? Yes. But will I be ready to eat everything and anything and murder people for food in 3 days? Yes, okay? So when you do starvation-style diets, when you eat significantly below what you should, below that 70% marker of your normal daily needs, when you consume below that, it will give you short-term weight loss, but it will not give you long-term success, okay? Fat loss is best approached as a lifestyle change. So that way, what you lose, you keep off. So you're not going to lose 30 pounds in 30 days, only to gain back 30 pounds in the next 15 days. And that's typically what happens. So anybody who's ever crashed diet for a vacation, if you're in college and you crash diet for spring break, if you're an adult and you crash dieted for some, cruise or boat trip or vacation to the beach or whatever the hell that you wanted to look better than what you really are, okay, and impress people that probably didn't give a shit in the first place. But we've all done those crash efforts to recognize that in no way are they long term, and sometimes we actually feel worse off afterwards. So that's what you're doing on a macro, large scale when your lifestyle involves trying to eat less and less and less below what is a proper number amount. So what is a proper number amount to be in a caloric deficit for fat loss? We cover that in podcast 390. So we say that if you have a regular, just being alive, wake calorie amount, should be at least 70% of what your daily needs are, okay? How do you know what your daily needs are? We have podcast 153, titled How Many Calories Do I Need? That tells you your caloric amount, okay? So you would go figure out your number from podcast 153, and you would create a caloric deficit within 70% up to 100% of that number. So if you eat exactly what the numbers are of calories you need per day, you're not going to lose weight, okay? Makes sense. But how much lower than 100% should you go? whatever you can maintain and handle the effects of. So if you eat 90% of the number that you find in podcast 153, and you slowly are losing maybe a half a pound a week, and it's a sensation of hunger, or it's a sensation of restriction that you're okay with and you can control, then 90% is the perfect number for you. Some people can control 80%. Some people can maybe control 70%. So you would have a caloric reduction below the number you found in podcast 153, but not below 70%. So you would reduce that number from 153, maybe 5-10%, see what results you get. If you don't lose enough off the scale, or you don't lose enough body fat in your clothing, the way the clothing fits, and you want to lose more, you try to adjust that number even lower. But you never go lower than 70%. That gives you the window that you should have your caloric reduction in, okay, within that 70 to 100%. How far into that window you go just depends on what your abilities are to control the effects of that. So when you reduce calories severely, say I went from 100 down to 70, I might be really freaking hungry. I might start getting tired during the day, start having cravings, and all of a sudden I'll break from my diet, overeat. So a 30% reduction was not good because it was not sustainable. So then maybe the next time you try just a 20% reduction. Maybe you last a couple more days, maybe 2 weeks, but then you still kind of break on the diet and it's hard to maintain. So then you go down to maybe just a 10% reduction and you find that that's the right amount for you. So that's how you have to do it. You have to play the game of what a level of a reduction can I maintain and still have a healthy, happy life and not go freaking crazy and wanting to punch everybody for food. So the best way to create a lifestyle around fat loss. So avoid eating too low, avoid starvation style dieting. The best way to do that is to listen to podcast 153, find out your total caloric needs. Okay. So in a earlier podcast, in podcast 41, we discuss the components of a successful diet. The first component of most significance is caloric intake. The second component of most significance is how much protein you have in your diet compared to carbohydrates and fats. The third most important significant component is meal timing, and kind of what coincides with that is meal frequency. So how often you eat and when you eat compared to your activity level. Those are the three most impactful areas that you need to pay attention to when thinking of a lifestyle successful way of eating. Is what are my total calories? Am I eating the right amount of protein? Am I eating at the right times? Notice how none of those included whether you're eating organic or not, whether you're eating wheat products or white products. Whether you're eating, sugar-free versus sugar added versus sugar fake versus whatever the hell else they do with sugar. Okay? The three most important components are discussed in podcast 41, titled Diet Right, What Matters Most. That actually discusses all five. But that discusses why the top three are the top three. The top three are, again, calories is most important. That determines the direction of a diet. If you eat a surplus of calories, you will gain weight. Somebody wants to build muscle, that's a goal of theirs. They want to do that. If you eat at your caloric maintenance and you exercise on a regular basis, you will slowly build muscle and slowly lose fat over time, but you'll weigh about the same. If you have a caloric reduction, okay, but still within that 70 to 100% window, you will lose body fat over time, but in a controlled, healthy manner. So calories determines the direction of a diet, whether you gain weight, stay the same, or lose weight. Protein is extremely important for many, many, many reasons. So one of the bigger reasons is it allows you to not overeat carbs and fats, which, if not used in the body, can contribute to formation of body fat. Whereas, if you eat enough protein, protein does a lot of good stuff in our body. So if you eat a lot of protein, it helps go towards growing your hair, your skin, your nails, helps go towards repairing and building new muscle tissue or repairing old muscle tissue, helps regulate body temperature, helps regulate body body kind of water retention kind of process, does a whole bunch of stuff, okay, even pH balance of the blood. So protein does a whole bunch of crazy things for us. So it has a lot of good uses. It gets used up. And by eating enough protein in your diet, It'll help with satiation of meals, making you feel fuller, making you eat less and less carbs and fats, which, when consumed in excess, contribute more towards body fat. So you want to avoid having excess of carbs and fats because those can contribute to making you fat. Where if you have excess of protein, those do not contribute to making you fat. They actually contribute more towards all the processes that protein does for us. So protein, again, helps us build and repair muscle, helps regulate, blood, all that stuff we talked about, hair, skin, nails, all that good stuff. So protein is extremely helpful for us for many good reasons, including helping us control carb and fat intake. Okay? That's the best thing we want to do, is control calories, control protein. And then the third most important component is controlling meal timing and meal frequency. So you would want to make sure you eat small portions of foods, meals, so you don't overeat each individual meal. And you want to eat more when you're more active, eat less when you're less active. So you have to find ways to consume calories that don't feel like they're time consuming. Because everybody's going to say, I don't have time to eat. Yes, you do. Okay? You can get a snack pack of cashews from a gas station. You can get cheese sticks from a grocery store. You can get anything you need from gas stations and grocery stores that are very fast forms of food and don't require a lot of preparation. So it's just redefining what you consider to be a meal. It's just consuming calories. Doesn't mean you have to cook it. Doesn't mean you have to sit down at the table to eat it. Okay? You just have to put more calories in your face when you're more active, put less calories in your face when you're less active. So if you do that, if you control caloric intake, okay, you control protein intake, and you eat correct portions at the times when you're most active, that'll help you overall lose the fat or stay the same weight and help with body composition, or like we said, even gain weight over time. So where your calories go determines where the direction of your diet. So if you're listening to this to help with body fat and you want to lose weight, okay, controlling calories in that 70% to 100% window gives you that direction of weight loss, fat loss. Making sure you can eat enough protein helps you with all the body processes of protein, and make sure you don't overeat carbs and fats. And then eating more when you're more active and eating more frequent meals helps decrease the need for the body to have and maintain body fat. So you're actually fighting against our natural needs for body fat, which allows you to become leaner and leaner over time because your body feels that body fat is less and less necessary. Okay? So that's what you want to do. Hopefully this was helpful to give you some good background information and give you a general kind of fast definition of why it's important to not under-eat your calories. So again, when you eat below that 70% mark, you down-regulate all processes of your body, which decreases overall health and makes it harder to lose weight over time because your body's burning less and less calories. You also run into like binging modes, you run into cravings, you run into low daily energy, low mood. There's a lot of just negative lifestyle effects of eating too little. So eating too little feels bad, and it's not even long-term successful. So that's why we want to avoid it. That's why we want to correct it. Okay? So the best things you can do is go listen to podcast 41. Again, that tells you what the most important components of a diet are. Then listen to podcast 153. Find out how many calories you need. Create your deficit somewhere between 70% to 100% of that number. Listen to podcast number 33 titled How Much Protein Do I Need? That'll tell you how much protein you need per day, okay? Which helps you control how much intake of carbs and fats you have. Then listen to podcast 249 about meal timing and 329 about meal frequency. Okay? So, that's it. That's what you want to focus on. If you listen to those podcasts, if you find out your total caloric needs, you control that amount within an appropriate window. You eat enough protein and you eat enough at the right times of the day. You're going to create a lifestyle of happiness. You're going to feel better, better energy, better digestion. Everything will go better. Are the results harder to get in that way? I would argue no, once you invest the time to learn the information. But that's what holds most people back. They're not going to take the 30 minutes to go listen to podcast 153. They're not going to take the 30 minutes to go listen to podcast 33. They're not going to take the 30 minutes to go listen to the other 2 podcasts either. So because you won't invest 2 hours of your life, you are going to spend the next 2, 3, 4 decades miserable. That's pretty ridiculous, right? So let's correct that. Let's be better than the average, okay? Let's take the time. Let's invest 2, even 3 hours into learning more about nutrition so we can take control over our life and we can live happier, healthier lives and live the life that we've wanted to have, but we just have yet to understand how to get it. So right in front of you today is the answers of how to get that life that you want. So go listen to the podcasts, okay? Collect the information. If you have any trouble figuring it all out, our email is brutalironjim@gmail.com. Email us immediately. If you're working with a trainer and they recommended this podcast to you, ask them. That's what they're there for. Okay, they can help you. So go seek out the help. If you try to invest the time and you still have questions, seek out help to better understand it and finally get control of your food. You can do this, okay? You can do it. Just invest a couple hours and then you'll have control over the rest of your life. I wish you the best, okay? If you need anything from us, email us at brutalironjim@gmail.com. Cool. Okay, if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. The more people we help, the happier the world will be. Also, if you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at brutalironjim. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we'd love to hear from you. This podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. You can tell us at our email, brutalironjim@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening. And thank you for watching.